Welcome. I'm Marek. I'm working for Red Hat for quite a long time, and most of the time I'm the guy who is switching off the computers. I'm quite well known between manufacturers because I am the only guy who do this like full time. So that's great. We are working for a Red Hat cluster, and because we are Red Hat, we have a very long support window. So our software has to be supported like for 12 to 15 years. So it is very important to select the right decision at the right time, because otherwise you can change a major, you can change the name of the option like once in 5 years. So if you want to do something what works and what will not work after a change, you have to wait 5 years, 6 years. It happens. I'm in Red Hat 12 years, and I was able to do this twice. So that's how it works. What is fencing and why we are doing it? If we have a node which misbehaves, then we have to like isolate it a bit. We need to do this in cluster. We need to do this in the clouds. We need to do this in virtualization management. And the only way how we can like isolate a machine from the environment so it won't break the data, which works always, is to switch it off. So there are no fancy things like attempt to test if the core is working or not. No, switch it off and reboot it, and hopefully it will be in a state which works. If it not, okay, happens. This is usually the last option for a normal software to handle the broken nodes. So if we did not work as they expect, the data are lost. There are three main ways how to isolate the node. The one is switch off the power cable. So we just remove the power and the node is off. The other option is to switch off the network, because if the node is not on the network, the node is not able to write anything to the data storage, and the data are safe. And the third option is like remove the storage network from the node. For example, if you have SCSI, that's the one of the options. So as you have heard, we are doing something what can be called like drivers for various small devices which are able to turn off the computer. So it's not rocket science. There are no fancy algorithms. There are nothing fancy, in fact, because that's the boring stuff. You write a driver, vendor release a new firmware, it is not working, you fix it, they release a new firmware, and then they want a new hardware, and you add it again and again. We have like more than 100 contributors, and we have more than 5,000 commits in the GitHub for last like 10 years or 12 years. Currently, we have around 50,000 line of codes. And when I was hired to Red Hat, it was written in Bash, C, and Perl. And then we were like forced to use Python, because it was a decision to use Python instead of Perl. It was a good decision, because the Perl 6 is still not there. And so we have to migrate it. We were able to focus not only on how to rewrite it, but also on how to reduce the number of lines. So after my 10 years in a project, I have created 8,000 more lines. And those 8,000 more lines are mostly for testing. So we were able to add new features, rewrite the code, and our code base is no bigger. So I would like to talk about some features and some decisions that we decide to use, and perhaps you will have a better idea of what we done wrong or what we done good. One of the first things that we think about was the idea of features. We have described a device, the hardware device with some options, and we said, okay, this device has IP address, this device has login name, password, you can use SSH, whatever. Of course, if the node has IP address, you can use additional features like port, use only IPv4, use only IPv6, and a ton of others. So there are some requirements and dependencies between those options. Currently, we have more than 70 of these features. And quite a big decision was, do we want to use strings for something like this? Or it will be better to use constants? We decided for strings, but there are quite a lot of drawbacks for this. If you use strings, there is no way in Pylon to check if your names are used correctly or not. It is not able to handle the fact that your keys to a dictionary are always the static strings. So we have to write our own tool which do a static analysis to find out if there are no typos. That's a bad thing. The good thing is that we are able to define those features not only in our library, but also on the local driver. So we can put them together, and we can have some features which are really specific to one specific hardware, and it won't occur anywhere else, and this works. If we will use the constants instead of strings, we will not have to do our own static analysis, what will be great, but we will have to handle those constants and differentiate between those constants which were defined locally and which are defined in the library. When we are using error messages, which are like same across defense agents, they are constants. So we are in between those two places, and I don't really know which way is better. One of our main issues was the configurability. Originally, we have like 10 command line options that can be used, like login, password, IP address, help, verbose, like quite normal options. And currently, we have like more than 60, and usually on the normal driver, you have like half of them is available. We are able to configure things that are really strange. So you can configure end of line. It is LF, CR, CRLF, or something completely different. You can define options which set the path to SSH. In fact, we do not have any constant in a configuration. Everything can be set. It means that when the user type --help, he's quite confused because he can see quite a lot of options which he should not use. But because our customers are afraid to edit our code, it's much better for them to just edit the command line options. We have some kind of description of our API, so how to use our software. So the other teams can build on top of this API, which is in XML, because it's a standard of Open Cluster Framework. And we use this for the others, so they can create their own user interface, and they can like set whatever they want, and they don't have to know about this specific fence agents or driver. As you can see, we have there a bit of inconsistency. We have the name of the parameter is cmd_prompt, but it's dash dash command dash prompt. It's a bad idea, but we will have to wait for another change when we will be able to forfeit the backbar compatibility, what should be in the few years probably. So there are issues which we know about, but we have to wait a few years until we can fix them. That's really like distracting. As you can see, you can also set the command prompt when you log in somewhere. It can have some strange command prompt which is not supported, and you have to change it. So there are a ton of options which are really like useless for normal persons. The addition of this API, like in '98 probably, helps us to solve one of the really pain in the ass for us, the documentation. If you have 70 various options, it's very hard to have the correct version of all arguments in the manual pages on the wiki. And one of our ideas was to use those XMLs to create manual pages. It took us like 5 years to do that because there were some other issues and more important stuff. And finally, we have something what takes this API description. It will create the manual pages. It will create the wiki pages. It was one of our best ideas to do, so we don't have to solve the documentation anymore. The documentation in the code is like on a very different border of this extreme. There is almost no documentation in the code, and what's usually quite wrong. But if there is no documentation, the documentation can be invalid. And we believe that our code is so simple that it does not need documentation. So in our main library, you will have like 5% of lines is documentation. But on the normal fence agents, it will be like close to 0. What we did not solve yet, and what I would like to hear from you how to do this correctly, is how to find out what is a valid configuration. For example, if the SSH is not in options and identifier is in options, so the public key is, so the private key is present, then there is an error because you can use private keys only together with SSH. We have encoded this directly to the library, to the fence drivers, and the issue is this is not a good idea. Because currently, when you have a management in a JavaScript, you wish to use same validation also in JavaScript. So you should have a way how to export these rules outside. We have like a small hack which helps us a lot. It's an action which like gives you a list of all errors without running the real code. But it's not a really good thing. So this is something what we still don't have and what we don't know how to do. And there are also other teams close to us which attempts to do very similar things. Their issue is that they don't know how the options can be configured together. So they have so much complexity in the command line options that even authors don't know what will happen if you configure some strange things together. The issue which we attempt to solve is the testing. What we can test the changes in the XML metadata, which prevents a lot of issues. We are using Trevi CI to do a continuous testing. We can test the functionality of hardware-independent functions. Currently, we have just one hardware-independent function. So it's like we can do it, but there is just one feature which delays the action, and that's all. We can use a static analysis to find out if we are using keys in a dictionary which should not be there. Great. but we should test if we can reboot the machine. And issue with the rebooting of machine is you need a machine. OK, I can have one. You need a real hardware that you are working with. And I don't have access to all hardware that we support. So this is the first issue. Even for a hardware which I have, I don't have it installed with all firmwares that are supported. So I will need like 50 machines of very same thing with a different firmware. Because if I ask our IT guys, please, I want a new firmware, they say, OK, I will give it to the machine. And I say, OK, I want the another firmware, and usually you have to use some kind of web management, and it took like half an hour, and it has to be rebooted and reconfigured. So this is not working. We have proposed a network simulator, which should help us to do this. Currently, it is in a pull request for last year, so we still don't know how to do it properly, because we need to work with all types of communication that is around. So HTTP, HTTPS, Telnet, what is something what cannot be easily mocked, SSH, SNMP, and also we are using some third-party binaries for some specific things that we do not want to support directly. So for IPMI, SCSI, VMware, there is always something what can be used only by someone else, and there are a lot of error messages and error states that have to be solved somehow. So our network simulator, or our simulator of devices, has to support all of this. And also, it has to do a proper timing for all these operations. So it is the issue if the response is too fast or too slow. We have to find out that it was working and it is not working anymore. For the code style, this is quite a different option for us, because we have to support the Python which is supported in Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So in the Red Hat Enterprise Linux 5, we have Python 2.4. In the 6, we have 2.6. And in the 7, we have 2.7. When we wish to switch to Python 3, there is a lot of things how to write the code in Python 2.7 to be able to run it with Python 2 and Python 3. But we were not able to use this because we had to support Python 2.4. We do not have to support Python 2.4 so much, so we are migrating towards Python 3. There are still quite a lot of issues because we are using a lot of libraries which were not ported yet, but it's going on. And our main benefit is the simplicity. There are people, our contributors, who don't write code in Python, but they are able to write and fix our fence agents because the code is so simple. For example, if you want to read something from the connection, you have to enter this line, which is on the slides. And as you can see, it's really verbose. So you can expect that if the first argument is command prompt, this is the value of command prompt. And if the second argument is shell timeout, it means how long will I wait until it's a timeout connection. So this is really verbose, but it helps us to provide our contributors easy way to contribute to us. Before this, we have there like -C and -T. It was easier for us, but no one knows what this means because there was no way how to find out what -T means in this particular fence agent. We have also some strange bugs. So For example, one of the well-known manufacturer decides that the end-of-life separator should be CR, LF, CR. No one see this before. No one see this afterwards, I hope. But we were not able to say to customers, OK, you should not use this kind of firmware. We have to provide them a solution to fix also such kind of issue. So the end of line is a configurable option. It's not a constant. This is the example of an option which is totally like strange for the most of the applications, but sometimes it works for us best. The other way is if you attempt to obtain the status of machine, if it is on or off, and the machine is missing, like you have a ton of blades, you remove it because it's broken, it's normally the fail, but if you know that this happens, you should say that if the blade is missing, it's all right. Perhaps the most strange things that happens to us is the last item. The monitoring of our hardware, which decides if the hardware is there or not, did not work between 2350 and 2355. Perhaps you know the joke or urban myth about a janitor who came every 10 minutes before midnight. They just switch off the server, plug in the vacuum cleaner, clean the room, and then put it back. This looks exactly the same. Hopefully, this was not our issue. This was the issue on the hardware side. And to be honest, this bug was there for last 40 years, and no one noticed. Thanks to IBM, they were able to find someone who understands the code from 60s and fix it. It was on the mainframe, so this happens on their side. OK, so that's all I want to talk about. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer them.
Thank you very much. We have only one question. Why XML for config files?
OK, it's not a config file. It's just the description of API. The config files do not exist for us. We are completely stateless. Because in the cluster, we don't know on which node we will be executed next time. So we know that we are running on this node at this moment, but our next run can be on a completely different node, on a different subnet, so we are not able to cache anything. So it depends only on our software of our customers or other teams to find out how they will send us the information. And we offer them two options. One is to use a command-like options, but there is an issue if you enter password, everyone can see it. And the other option is to use a standard input and enter it as a key and value. The description is in XML because we are part of standard of OCF, which was slightly extended by us. And the very same format is also used by SUSE and some other vendors. So that's the reason for XML.
OK, only one question, so thank you very much.